Hello, everyone, and may I say a very Merry Christmas to you and to all that you hold dear. I have a song I want to sing for you on this day. It's one of my favorite Christmas songs, and I happen to have a hand in writing it. It's music I put to a poem of Malcolm Guite's called Descent, which I think is one of the finest nativity poems ever written. I'm going to sing it for you in a minute, but I had Malcolm here a few months back, and while I had him, I put him in front of the camera and said, introduce this song for people, and I'll sing it later. And so we did that. And so you're going to hear Malcolm talk about the song and how it came about, and then I'll sing it for you. This is For the Journey this week, and my name is Steve Bell.
So when Steve Bell and I started working on music together, and he began to take some of my poems and reform them into songs. I mean, the first one he did, it was with the Epiphany on the Jordan. We were kind of doing that from a distance. We'd met, but in Cambridge, but then, Steve had to go back to Winnipeg, and so we were just corresponding. And then I realized, there was a certain point at which I realized this guy is really serious about this, because he called me up and said, I'm coming over to England, and is there a time in May when we could spend a few days together, and I'm working on this album, Keening for the Dawn, and we need to connect. And I thought, wow, somebody's coming all the distance to see me to work on poetry and song. I felt honoured. So I said, of course, and we found a time. And he came over, and we looked at various poems that might fit with the theme of the album. And I had a poem called Descent, which was quite a short poem. It was 3 verses, and it made a very simple contrast between the pagan gods of classical antiquity, the Olympians, the Apollos and Zeuses, and all up there on Mount Olympus, in the beautiful heaven of heavens, all perfect sculpted Greek forms, and how, you had to somehow aspire to these Olympian heights. And the poem made a contrast between those gods and the true God, who, as it were, begs to differ from all that aspiring religiosity, and instead comes and finds us where we are. He comes down, and he doesn't come down as a clean, clear, cold, classical marble statue. He comes down into the mess of life and gets involved with this. So I had this little poem, and it was just 3 verses. So I showed it to Steve, and he was playing around with his guitar, and he said, I've got it. I've got a structure for this. I think we can make a song out of this. The only problem, Malcolm, is that 3 verses is no good to me because of the structure of the song. I need double that. I need 6 verses. So if you could just produce the other 3 verses, we can get on with it. We're, making the song. And I was just so amazed by this. I thought, okay, that's fine. And I have a little hut at the bottom of the garden. I went down to my writing hut. And actually, the more I thought about it and the more I looked at it, the more I realized there was more to say here. And the other 3 verses flowed quite quickly. And to be honest, as a poem, let alone as a song, it's better than it was because of what Steve asked me to do. So let me recite the poem to you now, and then you'll hear. Actually, the other thing which was lovely on the album, Keening for the Dawn, Steve not only turned my poem into a beautiful song, but he invited me to read part of the poem on the record as part of the song, and we alternated the spoken and singing voice, and that was very effective. And of course, wow, I thought I'm on an actual recording. I was very thrilled. So here's the poem, Descent. They sought to soar into the skies, those classic gods of high renown, for lofty pride aspires to rise. But you came down. You dropped down from the mountains sheer, forsook the eagle for the dove. The other gods demanded fear, but you gave love. Where chiseled marbles seemed to freeze their abstract and perfected form, compassion brought you to your knees. Your blood was warm. They called for blood in sacrifice, and victims on their altars bled. When no one else could pay the price, you died instead. They towered above our mortal plane, dismissed this restless flesh with scorn, aloof from birth and death and pain. But you were born to these burdens borne by all, born with us all, astride the grave, weak to be with us when we fall. and strong to save. So the poem grew as we talked, and then Steve transformed it into this beautiful song.
They sought to soar into the skies, those classic gods of high renown. For lofty pride aspires to rise, but you came down. Lofty pride aspires to rise, but you came down. You dropped down from the mountains sheer, forsook the eagle for the dove. The other gods demanded fear, but you gave love. The other gods demanded fear, but you gave love.
Where chiseled marbles seem to freeze their abstract and perfected form, compassion brought you to your knees. Your blood was warm. They called for blood in sacrifice, and victims on their altars bled. When no one else could pay the price, you died instead.
When no one else could pay the price, you died instead. They towered above our mortal plane, dismissed this restless flesh with scorn, aloof from birth and death and pain, but you were born. Aloof from birth and death and pain, but you were born. Born to these burdens, born by all, born with us all, astride the grave, weak to be with us when we fall, and strong to save.
Weak to be with us when we fall, and strong